Imagine this. A line of cars stretching for hours at the border crossing between Russia and Belarus. Regular Russians waiting their turn in the queue, waiting to get permission to buy fuel. And when they finally reach those pumps, there is a limit. Just 10 liters per canister. The country that labels itself an energy superpower has now brought gasoline rationing to its own citizens at the border with Belarus during what is effectively wartime scarcity. But this isn't a claim being made on Ukrainian Telegram channels. Russia is confirming it via its own reported numbers. In recent weeks, sales of Belarusian gasoline on the St. Petersburg exchange, the volume intended for replenishing reserves, dropped from thousands of tons per day to as low as 240 tons. Across the Kerch Strait in occupied Crimea, local authorities began setting up so-called points of invincibility, warming stations for those deprived of electricity and fuel. That's the type of branding occupation forces use when they can no longer keep the lights on or the pumps running. And it leads us to a question worth reflecting on. How does an oil powerhouse that processes millions of barrels daily suddenly find itself rationing 10 liters per person? The answer lies in the brutal nights between July 6th and July 8th, when both sides suffered catastrophic losses. Russia launched Kyiv's deadliest missile attack of the week, turning homes into mass graves for civilians. And we will delve deeper into that situation because it goes far beyond mere casualty counts. Ukraine retaliated, but not against Russian apartment buildings. Instead, they targeted Putin's war effort at its most vulnerable point: oil production. The refineries, pipelines, tankers carrying crude oil to market, that's where the fuel is, and it's where the money comes from. And there lies the crux of our story. We see Russians rationing at the border. We hear reports that Russia's biggest refinery has stopped selling its oil. It would be easy to conclude, is Ukraine winning a war on another front? A long-range war of attrition by literally setting Russian oil mills ablaze? This is an important question, and this week's news seems to strongly suggest the answer is yes. But we also know that after one explosive week in lights and flames, it would be just as easy to jump to conclusions again. So let me explain why I take a more cautious approach to these reports. Over the next several minutes, I will break down what has been verified by Reuters investigations, satellite imagery, and even statements from Russia's own governors. And where we can only take Ukraine's word for it, we'll say so. The reality is far messier than a single headline might lead you to believe, but the truth of the situation will be much more interesting in any case. The answer is clear when you look at what Russia has been doing with its missiles and drones during those same overnight attacks. They are not aimed at fuel depots or ammunition dumps, but at people asleep in their beds. The worst came to Kyiv and the nearby town of Vyshnieve, where rescue crews continued for days after the initial attack on the night of September 6th to dig through rubble in Kava district, pulling bodies from under collapsed floors, while they were still counting those killed during the strike by September 7. 19 dead, 2 children, and 26 injured. Andriy Danik, head of Ukraine's emergency service, said more than 1,000 of its specialists, along with around 250 pieces of equipment, worked in these two districts of Kyiv and Vyshnieve for days to uncover victims. That's just how much work it takes for 24 hours after one single night of cleaning up. It was the same in Kharkiv, where another Russian attack targeted an apartment building in the Nemyshlyansky district. 2 people were killed and around 24 others wounded, with 3 children among them. Again, this is an ordinary residential area, not a barracks or depot, but homes. And the night after that brought further Russian ballistic missile attacks on Kyiv. This strike left one woman dead and damaged 42 railway cars in a train depot, according to Timur Tkachenko, the head of Kyiv's military administration. The third attack this time was carried out by a pair of Russia's cluster warhead-equipped ballistic missiles, which are designed to release dozens of smaller warheads that spray lethal fragments over an area. They hit Odessa, leaving 6 people wounded, 1 seriously. But let's not just talk about numbers and move on, because every one of those deaths was officially confirmed by the Ukrainian government, and each is a real person from Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa who has left behind loved ones.
But more importantly, we see an interesting pattern in our list of targets that will be important to remember as we discuss what Ukraine does next. Striking residential buildings, gas stations, rail depots, and even when the front line itself seems to have stalled, all while knowing its numbers are being tracked by anonymous channels all over the world. What do these attacks tell us about Russia? Well, they show us that it has run out of options on the battlefield. The only option left is what we've just discussed: targeting Ukrainian civilians in an effort to punish them for a war that Ukraine is winning on the ground. But where did Ukraine take its revenge? Oil was their target, not just for its economic value, but because oil is what fuels tanks, aircraft, and power generators. It also means attacking the refineries that process crude into fuel products. The first strike on this refinery came on the 6th at Omsk in western Siberia. As Russia's largest refinery, it lies around 3,400 kilometers away from Ukraine, far enough that theoretically, Ukrainian drones should have no way of reaching it. At least 4 did anyway. They hit a critical crude processing unit and caused more damage to the plant. But here is where it gets interesting. This isn't just Russian propaganda. According to Reuters, the refinery has halted production and ceased selling fuel on the exchange because 2 units, which together handle most of its capacity, have been damaged or taken out of commission. It means that when Russia looks at its own trading data, it sees evidence of one of its most important refineries going offline. If you're getting value from this video, please give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more in-depth analysis. Omsk was just one example in a series of successful Ukrainian drone attacks over a single stretch of land. Fires broke out at Russia's Saratov refinery on the Volga, where Ukraine managed to ignite a cracking unit, as well as at the massive petrochemical complex in Nizhnekamsk, located deep within Tatarstan. In Bashkortostan, drones struck a Transneft pipeline node at Ufa before moving further south and striking another compressor station along Russia's Blue Stream gas system near Krasnodar. President Volodymyr Zelensky later claimed that no major refinery remained untouched by Ukraine's strikes. An ambitious boast which, even if not strictly true in the long run, as refineries are repaired, contains a kernel of truth that exposes the disparity between the two sides at war. Russia has been spending its week launching missiles into apartment buildings and rail depots because it lacks the means to move forward on the battlefield. Ukraine is busy flying thousands of kilometers over Russian territory to strike the specific infrastructure critical to keeping Russian fuel flowing, all while carefully targeting economic assets rather than population centers. It's not just about morality, it's also a matter of strategy. Attacking a 5-story apartment building in Kharkov certainly scares the neighbors, but it doesn't cost Putin much fuel on his front lines. But taking out a crude refinery at Omsk costs him liters and liters of diesel. And as more refineries go offline, their shortage spreads through Russia's refineries to its exchanges, and finally back into those long queues we saw earlier in the video. So the real question is, what did this exchange actually cost Putin? But as it turns out, Ukraine had been busy. According to Russia's own official reporting, which is more reliable on this front than any claims coming from Kyiv, the Russian Defense Ministry noted that its air defenses were mobilized in what it called the largest drone attack over a 2-year span. It claimed to have destroyed 452 drones overnight, with 430 of them reportedly en route for Moscow. The number itself is staggering enough, but the fact that Russia is disclosing this information at all reveals a deeper truth about their situation, an apparent lack of confidence in its own defensive capabilities and a growing sense of vulnerability from far away from the front lines. As if to underscore this point, Ukrainian deep strike forces also targeted another critical supply line, the shadow fleet used by Russia to smuggle sanctioned oil around the globe. These operations, Ukraine claimed, have seen 21 ships hit over a 3-day period since July's creation of an independent center for deep strike in Crimea, which has knocked out approximately 50 energy facilities in occupied Crimea since early July alone. The number of vessels involved is reported by Ukraine itself. This should be treated as a claim rather than an established fact for now.
However, the consequences were felt elsewhere and in much more tangible ways. 18 towns and districts across Crimea lost power, with Simferopol, Kerch, and Yevpatoria being among them. Fuel and electricity became so scarce that Russian authorities had to open emergency charging stations and warming centers throughout the peninsula. When the occupying administration is announcing these types of measures, even in a desperate attempt at damage control, the impact on Ukraine's campaign against Russia becomes clear. The counter-move strikes where it hurts most. But there are complications when analyzing whether this indicates any significant momentum to further operations. That complication comes from President Zelensky himself, who recently told the Financial Times that the front line has largely stabilized and the contested ground has shifted to the sky. This is a critical statement for understanding Ukraine's position in the war. It suggests that the ground war hasn't progressed all that much lately, but instead is being decided from above, at least not currently. It's a crucial distinction. A week of burning oil fields and Crimea towns without power shows Ukraine's strategy is paying off. It shows Putin's war machine is bleeding in some way. But the long-range war isn't over yet. You can fix your refineries, you can replace broken tankers, and Russia still launched its most devastating missile attack of the week on Kyiv rather than Omsk. But this leads us to our conclusion. Ukraine attacked what makes Putin's war machine run, while Russia defended the capital itself. It was a good trade. That's when Ukraine brought its advantage to the negotiating table. While Russia's air defenses are still reeling after their over-Moscow debacle, Zelensky attended NATO's summit in Ankara and leveraged his country's drone warfare campaign during negotiations. In a series of what it has dubbed drone deals, Ukraine reached an agreement with Denmark, the 9th under its so-called Danish model, which grants allies access to combat-proven Ukrainian arms, and signed agreements with Estonia and the Netherlands as well. The pitch was simple. No one else has learned how to conduct drone warfare in actual combat like Ukraine, and now partners can buy that experience for themselves. Canada announced a fresh $900 million package focused on air defense in addition to these deals. Zelensky underscored his case by claiming that nearly 28,000 Russian soldiers were killed in June alone, mostly with drones. Though Kyiv has claimed the figure, it hasn't been independently verified and should be taken at face value for now. But this is real. It's a trend you shouldn't ignore, and there are good reasons why Western leaders are so eager to get Ukraine on board. It has become the world leader in modern warfare tactics, with NATO members preferring to learn from it rather than try to keep up. And that brings us back to another area where oil fires and drone deals aren't doing enough just yet. The most devastating attacks this week did not come via drone. They came in the form of ballistic missiles raining down on Kiev, Kharkiv, and Odessa. Ukraine still struggles to counter these weapons reliably. That is a weakness Zelensky highlighted during his summit time with Europe's leaders. He advocated for greater investment in European anti-ballistic missile production, along with requests for licenses that would allow him to manufacture Patriot systems within Ukraine itself. If he can close this gap, then the ultimate weapon of terror Moscow resorts to when it is unable to achieve its goals on the ground will become much less effective. And so, no, a single week of oil fires hasn't won Ukraine the long-range war either. It does give us an indication of where things are going. Ukraine is making the cost of Russia's invasion, in terms of fuel and money, much realer. It's exporting its hard-earned drone warfare experience to others, and it's slowly but steadily dismantling a vital line of Russia's attack on Ukrainian cities. This isn't a knockout blow, at least not yet. The country is fighting from strength. If you want to keep up with our deep dive into Ukraine's deep strike campaign, as we continue to rely closely on primary sources while being clear about what's confirmed and what's still an allegation, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing this video so that these breakdowns reach a wider audience. And be sure to check out my other videos for more analysis into the Ukraine long-range war.